So Bob and I were working with the sons of male alcoholics who also had an extensive family history of alcoholism, a very specific population. That eventually became essentially impossible as the dictates came down from above that half our research subjects had to be female, which was a real problem for our research enterprise because we were actually researching a particular kind of primarily male psychopathology. And our subjects had to be young men who weren't alcoholic, who did drink, who had alcoholic fathers, alcoholic grandfathers. So they had to have an alcoholic father, and at least another close alcoholic relative male, and not an alcoholic mother, because that would have exposed them in principle to fetal alcohol syndrome. And we were looking at the biological basis of the proclivity to alcoholism. And we were interested in the role of disinhibition in that, right? So you might say, well, one of the reasons people might drink is because they're biochemically responsive to alcohol in some manner that's either directly rewarding like cocaine or anxiety reducing like Valium and barbiturates. But another possible hypothesis is they're just not very good at impulse control. And so an impulse would be a biological impetus that wants short-term gratification like lust or hunger or thirst or the desire to breathe for that matter. And obviously you have to abide by those dictates or you die. But if you only fall prey to them, then you're impulsive and that dysregulates your medium to long-term survival. So we're interested in impulsivity. Bob and I started to investigate the neuropsychological literature. A lot of people at McGill were working on the assessment of so-called prefrontal cognitive ability and had developed a lot of practical tests for brain-damaged people to see what focal cognitive deficits they had as a consequence of their neurological condition or their brain surgery. And we started to apply that to the analysis of antisocial behavior, right? And Jean Séguin was very much involved in that. So what got you interested, Bob, in the realm of antisocial behavior? And Phil Zalazzo, right? We put together a neuropsychological battery, and then we had people who were drunk at 2 doses of alcohol, and we used high doses of alcohol in our lab, which was one of the things that made it rather unique. We looked at the specific patterns of neuropsychological deficits that alcohol produced. And alcohol doesn't interfere with things like vocabulary understanding or color perception, but it has a walloping effect on the ability to move information from short-term storage into long-term storage, even at relatively moderate doses. And it really interferes with complex motor coordination, although it doesn't suppress, let's say, it doesn't lengthen reaction time per se, simple reaction time, and had no effect on it all. That's right. So we started building a neuropsychological battery, first of all, to see what the nature of the overlap between criminal and aggressive behavior and the proclivity to alcoholism was, but also trying to investigate why alcohol made people aggressive, because it is one of the few drugs, and your research was part of what it demonstrated this, that alcohol actually does make people more aggressive. I remember a study we discussed that you devised where people were put into a bus aggression task, I think, where they were asked to administer shocks, electrical shocks of a certain duration and intensity to their competitors in a game-like scenario, low levels of shock, and they weren't actually shocking a real person. That was a sham. But one of the hypotheses was that people who were drunk just didn't know what they were doing. So if I remember correctly, you had the drunks, the people who were alcohol intoxicated, write down or otherwise record the level of shocks that they were administering and the duration to make that conscious. And what happened was that actually made the drunk people more aggressive rather than less. So it wasn't merely a matter of alcohol-induced stupidity. There was real facilitation of aggression that seemed to be associated with something like disinhibition.